Hey everybody! Look, gave you a little preview there before the title card came back up. So welcome to the show. Sorry I'm an hour late of my usual start time, but I'll tell you the story of that here coming up in a minute. And I'm going to do that first. So I'm going to do that before I get to the patron questions. So those of you who are patrons and you asked your patron questions, I am going to get to your questions in a couple of minutes. I'm going to tell the story first. So just, hang with me because this is all going somewhere. And also I want to apologize if I know there's more background noise than usual for the show. And that's because the window is open over here and the fan is on because it's fucking hot. So I apologize for the more the more background noise than usual. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. I'll talk a little louder. And anyway, so yeah, the show is an hour later than it usually is. And that is because, oh, hi, Josh Colson. First time seeing me live. Well, get ready to be disappointed. So the reason why the show was pushed back an hour is because I had to go pick up my truck from the garage. And the reason why my truck was at the garage was that my truck needed to have its brakes replaced, which is fine. Like, it's expensive, but it's not, thankfully, it's not more expensive than I can afford. And it's just that's fine. That's not what the story's about. The story's about the fact that I took the truck on Tuesday, right? And I dropped the truck off at the dealership, at the service garage at the dealership. They said, okay, we'll have a look. We'll tell you what's wrong with it. We'll call you back. I was thinking maybe I'll get the truck back tomorrow at the latest, right? So service department calls me back. And they say, oh, we found out all this stuff that's wrong with the truck, and here's what we need. And we need to order some parts. So we'll order the parts. Parts probably won't be here until tomorrow, but then tomorrow it should be done, and you can come pick it up tomorrow. I said, great, right? Tomorrow comes, which will be Wednesday. They call me back. They say, hey, it was the part didn't get here until late, so we won't have it done for you today, but it'll be done tomorrow. We'll call you tomorrow and we'll tell you when it's done. So I said, great. Because I really, I work from home. I don't need to be going places, and we're not supposed to go places unless we have to anyway, right? So it was all good. The next day comes, nobody calls. Not a word from anybody from the service department, from the garage. I have no idea what's going on. So today comes, I say, all right, I need to find out about my truck. I'm going to wait until 2 o'clock this afternoon. The garage closes at 6. I'll give them until 2. If I don't hear anything, I'll call and I'll just see, what the status is. So that's what happens. I don't hear from anybody this morning. I wait until a little bit after 2 o'clock, and I call the garage. I have to call them. I have to call them on my phone and talk to them. You can't email them. You can't text them. I mean, you can, but if you want to have if you want any chance at all of getting a timely response from a human being, you can't email them. You can't text them. You can't contact them through their website. You have to call them on your phone and talk to someone with your voice, like a goddamn Paleolithic Australopithecus. So that's what I did. I hate talking on the phone, especially to strangers, especially to people who I'm not used to talking about. I did it. I called up the garage. Hello. I told him who I was. First, here's what happened. The person at the front desk answers the phone, says, how may I direct your call? I say, service department. So she says, okay. She connects me to the service department. She connects me to the wrong service department because it's one of those multiple brand dealerships where they deal like with Chryslers and Chevys and Dodge and everything. So she connects me to the Dodge service department. I need the GM service department. So the guy at the Dodge service department picks up the phone. I tell him what my problem is. He says, oh, they connected you to the wrong service department. You want the GM service department. Let me connect you. So he transfers me over to the GM service department. The guy back there answers the phone. He says, what can I do for you? I tell him my name. I tell him my truck. I say, and he says, okay, well, looks like your service representative is so-and-so. So let me go find so-and-so, and then so-and-so will get on the phone and tell you what the deal is. I say, great. I'm on hold for 10 minutes. Someone picks up the phone, has no idea who I am or why I've called, just picks up the phone like I'm calling for the first time, says, service department, how can I help you? I tell him the story. I tell him who I am and why I'm calling. He says, oh, looks like on the computer your service rep is so-and-so. Let me go find her. This is like a parody of a customer service story, right? So I at that point, I'm like laughing on the phone. I say, sure, fine, whatever. Puts me back on hold for another couple of minutes. Dory, I used a real name. I shouldn't have used a real name. Pretend that I didn't say that. Doris. We'll just say Doris. The customer service representative. She picks up the phone. Has no idea who I am or why I'm calling. Just says, hello. So I tell her who I am again. I tell her why I'm calling. She says, I don't know what the update is. Let me go back and talk to the service technicians, and I will call you back. So I say, okay, fine. We hang up. Like an hour later, she calls me back, and she tells me that my truck will be ready by end of day today. So then she calls me back again a couple hours later to officially tell me that it's done and that I can come pick it up. And by that point, I knew it was going to be later than I was going to be out beyond 6 o'clock. So I went ahead and pushed the start time of the show back. And I went and picked up the truck. My wife graciously gave me a ride to the garage just as she was kind enough to drop me off, or to pick me up after I dropped the truck off on Tuesday. We go pick up the truck, pay for it. Everything's fine. That's my idea of kind of a shitty day. I mean, I've had worse days. I've had unusually bad days, like when a relative dies, or when something goes catastrophically wrong. But on the whole, like when I consider like an average day for my life, today the business with the truck and having to play phone tag with the garage and all that stuff, and and then having to pay for it and it being a lot of money, but not like a crippling amount of money, but a lot of money. Like, that's a bad day for me. Today was a relatively bad day for me. That's how privileged I am. Like, that's how good my life is. That I can sit down in front of a camera and tell this story about some customer service hijinks on the phone and not being sure whether or not my truck would be ready to pick up from the garage today because it was supposed to be the day before, and then it was supposed to be the day before that. Like that, all of that for me makes kind of a crappy day, because that's how good my life is. I can't imagine what it must be like for people in this country today and over the last week or so who have been having such catastrophically worse days than I have ever had. I was thinking about that as I took like a moment to reflect after I got off the phone with the garage, and I was thinking, I thought, this is a bad day for me. And I really don't know what a bad day is for a lot of people, because I've been involved in a lot of traffic stops with cops. I've been pulled over more times than I can remember ever since I first got my driver's license. I've been pulled over for speeding. I've been pulled over for having a tail light out, for not coming to a complete stop at a stop sign. I've been pulled over for all kinds of traffic violations, moving violations. I've got tickets. Never once have I ever felt like my life was in danger. Never once have I ever sat in my car with the cop parked behind me, waiting for him to get out, and thought, I wonder if he's going to kill me. I wonder if I'm going to end up handcuffed on the ground. I wonder if I'm going to have a gun pointed at me in the next couple of minutes. That's never happened to me, ever. The thought doesn't even cross my mind. And there are millions of people in this country where that thought crosses their mind constantly. Where if you are a black American, if you are a person of color in general in the United States, but especially if you're a black American and you get pulled over by a cop, and especially if the cop who pulls you over is a white guy, that's probably the only thing going through your head. Am I going to get shot? Am I going to get killed? And it doesn't matter if you did anything wrong, because a lot of times when it happens, the person who gets shot didn't do anything wrong, didn't commit any kind of a crime, didn't have a gun, and they end up dead. And I mean, we know we know the names of these people. We know the names of the innocent victims who have been killed by cops, who are mostly people of color, mostly black people, and most of the cops are white people. Not all, but most of the cops are white people. And the most recent one is George Floyd. Although I feel like I need to mention there's also Tony McDade, who was a black trans man who was killed by police in Tallahassee, Florida, a couple of days ago. And people might say, well, that's a more complicated situation because there was violence going on, and Tony had posted some things on social media saying about how he was going to try to get the cops to kill him, and he was going to kill other people, and it was a violent situation. And it's okay. It's a lot more complicated than, say, the George Floyd situation. But still, I mean, a cop's job is not to be a summary executioner. A cop's job is to enforce the law, and if a criminal is apprehended committing a crime, to apprehend that criminal safely and then to give them their day in court, not to execute them on the street, which is what happens far too often, especially for people of color, as I keep saying, and most especially for black folks. We also remember, Michael Brown from Ferguson, Philando Castile, Eric Garner. There's a name that a lot of people throughout the country might not know, because it wasn't so much a national story. But there is a man in this area, in Martinsburg actually, which is like a 30-minute drive from my house, named Wayne Jones, who was a black man who was shot and killed by cops in Martinsburg 7 years ago. Who was shot 23 times and killed. And his death was ruled a homicide. And none of the 5 cops who shot him, a total of 23 times, were charged with anything. So his death was a homicide. It was apparently killed by nobody. It was apparently committed by nobody. That was just in this area. 20 years ago, it was Amadou Diallo, who was shot 19 times, was shot at 41 times by 4 cops in the NYPD who had done nothing wrong. He was reaching for a wallet. One of the cops says, "I thought he was reaching for a gun." So they shot at him 41 times and killed him. They were not punished for that. They were charged at least, but they were acquitted. Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about it called 41 Shots, about the Amadou Diallo killing and about the plight of being a black person in America subjected to police violence and racism. Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about it called 41 Shots, performed the song in New York in Madison Square Garden. The president of the New York Fraternal Order of Police called Bruce Springsteen, I believe he called him a scumbag or a fucking scumbag or a fucking piece of garbage or something like that, for singing a song about police brutality. I don't think he said that about the actual cops who murdered the guy by shooting at him 41 times, but the rock star who wrote a song about it, he's a fucking scumbag. He's a fucking piece of shit. So this is the world that we live in today, and the only point I want to make by telling this story and by getting super heavy with you at the end of my customer service nightmare story is to all of you watching who are as privileged as I am, who enjoy the racial privilege that I enjoy as a white person in America. And I enjoy other kinds of privilege too, male privilege, cisgender privilege, but the topic of the day is race, and I definitely enjoy the top level of racial privilege in this country because I'm a white person. To those of you who are as privileged as I am, and who have the frame of reference I have for what a bad day is, let's just try to remember where our sympathies ought to lie. Let's just try to remember who we ought to be siding with and who we ought to be trying to stand up for and speak out for and amplify. And it's not Target. It's not businesses that have been burned by rioters. That's unfortunate. I wish that didn't happen. But the real crime is not people setting fire or fucking up a Target store. That's not the issue. The issue is police murdering people and getting away with it. The issue is racist police brutality and how it has been allowed to continue to happen, mostly unchecked, for years. This cop who killed George Floyd was doing it in a world where everybody knows everybody has a phone with a camera and they can start recording what is happening in front of them anytime. And he knew he was being recorded as he murdered this man. And he continued to do it because he had a confidence that he would not be held accountable for this. And he had a reasonable justification for that. There's a reasonable basis for a white cop murdering a black man in front of cameras to believe he will get away with that, because it has happened countless times before. So I'm just, that's all I wanted to tell you as far as that goes. Those of you who are like me, who enjoy my level of privilege, just let's keep perspective, and if we're having a bad day, like the bad day I just described having, let's remember that that's not really a bad day, and that there are people far worse off than we are who do not enjoy our privilege, who live in constant and completely rational fear that they will have their lives ruined or their lives taken away, their lives ended through absolutely no fault of their own, in a way that they probably could not have prevented because they didn't do anything wrong to bring it on in the first place. And the person who took their lives or ruined their lives will not even be punished for it. There's a lot of fucking things that need to change in this country. There's a lot of fucking things that need to change in this country. And that's just something that we really need to keep in mind. So anyway, that's all for my little soapbox. I'm going to go to patron questions now. Thank you for indulging me and listening to that. And I'll turn my attention to patron questions, and then after I get through the patron questions, I'll hang out with everybody in the live chat for a while. And I don't know, because of my little soapbox moment there, the show might go a little bit longer than it usually does, and plus we're an hour late. So just, if you can't hang out for the whole thing, that's completely cool. I understand. It might be a little later than it usually is, especially those of you who might be, in other parts of the world watching this. So that's okay. I don't mind. But patron questions. Let's go to our first patron question. And of course, it's from our friend Some Random Geek. And it's relevant to the topic I was just discussing. How about that? Anarchism 101 lesson in under 400 words. All cops are bastards, or all cops are bad. Hashtag ACAB, not assigned cop at birth. It could also be all cats are beautiful, but ACAB. Yes, even your uncle is a bastard. David Smith may be a wonderful person, but Officer Smith is a bastard because cops are bastards. They don't serve and protect citizens. They serve and protect private property and capital under capitalism. If you get mugged, they will file a report and put it on top of the other reports of mugged citizens. But if someone pooped in a Tim Hortons, a Canada donut chain, the police are on the ball ensuring poop justice. Oakland homeless unarmed moms squatting in a house that has been empty for a year were evicted by cops with AR-15s and a tank. If workers are on strike for better pay and work conditions, the business owners will send the cops to break up the strikes. The cops are class traitors. They are the armed forces of violence by the state. Remember the Haymarket Massacre. Remember when people used to be private property too, slaves. Cops used to be slave patrol to return runaway slaves. Let's not forget the 13th Amendment and the new Jim Crow. Prison labor and private prisons. Shouldn't private prisons be the biggest warning sign that capitalism is evil? Prisons for profits? And some of those profits go to politicians' campaigns to ensure that we still have private prisons. Companies that own and run ICE facilities for profits fund Democrats and Republicans' campaigns. Black Lives Matter. The police are not needed once you get rid of capitalism, which would get rid of poverty and thus get rid of most of the crimes. Humane holding facilities should be for containment and rehabilitation, not punishment. Investors will still be needed for the occasional murder. I guess that might mean investigators, not investors. Anyway, volunteering association community policing is what I suggest to replace the police force. Black Panthers protect their communities from the cops. Gangs in ghettos do that now versus ICE. Audible Anarchist has an audio essay here, A World Without Police. There's the link. And another link for more information. And then the question, Steve, do you feel we need the police? And why do liberals always say, my uncle is one of the good cops, when I say all cops are bastards? Should I say fuck the police instead? When will liberals understand cops are not needed? Or another way to look at it, are all Starfleet admirals bastards? It's funny. I saw the one janitor said that he prefers to say "fuck the police" as opposed to "all cops are bastards," because "fuck the police" implicates the job itself, sort of the organization, the institution, as opposed to arguing that each and every individual cop is a bastard. Although I get the reasoning behind saying that too. I know. I mean, yeah, I think we do need police. I notice in your question, you even say volunteer association community policing is what I suggest to replace the police force. That's still police. Like, we're still going to need a group of people who are designated, who are given the authority, whether they are independent from the state or whether we're talking about a scenario where there is no state or whatever we're talking about, there will still need to be a group of people who are empowered to enforce the law and keep the peace. Because, yeah, I think you're right. If we take away poverty, that would take away a lot of the impetus behind crimes. If you take away or make it more difficult for people to exploit other people, then yeah, you take away the impetus behind a lot of crime. Police will not be as needed, but I think you'll always need a group or an organization to enforce the law and to make sure that, and to protect people and to, ensure a free and equal and peaceful society. Are the police that we have now that institution? Of course not. Absolutely not. Would it be great? Do I think that most, if not all, police departments as they currently exist in the United States need to be completely torn down to the ground and rebuilt from square one, like from the ground up? Absolutely. Absolutely, I think that. Do I think that police need to be trained differently? Absolutely. Do I think that police need to have radically different attitudes than they have? Yeah, for sure. Do I think that police need to be less heavily armed, or perhaps even not armed at all, except for specific cases where arms are needed? Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Other countries have that, where just a usual rank and file patrolman is not walking around with a gun. Police do have guns, but only for specific situations where a gun is decided that is necessary. Cops just walking around or driving around on patrol do not have guns. And that seems to work pretty well, and I think that's what we should have here. So yeah, and demilitarize the police, criminal justice reform. I'm all for getting rid of for-profit prisons. I agree with a lot of that. But I notice that even in your question, when you say let's get rid of the police, and then you're going to replace it with another form of police. So I do think that we need to have some institution or some organization that is empowered to enforce laws and keep the peace. But the police that we have now, I think it's obvious that that's not working. That's just not working at all. I mean, I don't see why that should be a controversial statement. That the police, the law enforcement apparatus we have in this country right now, in terms of like local and state police department, it's just not working. It's just not working. Next question is from Joshua Hillerup. Is there any way to not be an anxious ball of mess right now? I have been trying to cope through just trying to distract myself, like just trying to focus on work, trying to have things to do, to put my energy and my thought, and my creativity into, that will sort of give me an excuse to turn away. That has helped. But and I know other people have said, like, get involved in community activism, get involved in organizing, I know a lot of my friends in the Minneapolis area have been doing amazing work, like volunteering to support the protesters, to give them the supplies that they need, to make sure that they have a place to come if they need to take a break, or to raise money to bail people out, to give people rides or pick people up. And that is helping tremendously. I know for a fact, I have friends in the Minneapolis area that are emotionally taking it all extremely hard, as they should, as is completely natural. But they are throwing themselves into helping any way that they can, financially, through volunteering, through whatever they can do. And that is, and it's not, they're not only helping other people, it's also helping themselves. So I would recommend that to you as well, if it's possible for you to get involved in something like that. But yeah, just find work, find work that either makes you feel as though you're contributing in a positive way and helping, or that at least gives you something to do that will offer you a little bit of comfort and a little bit of release and distraction. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. Dr. Babylon, I've now watched every single feature-length live-action Superman film ever made. Two things occurred to me after watching the original Richard Donner Superman film. The first was, wow, now I finally understand why Steve thinks Krypton should just be backstory. And the other was, wow, this movie really sucks. You'd think that when the first movie begins with an extraneous 30-minute long sequence on Krypton and ends with the deus ex machina of the protagonist traveling backwards in time by flying around the Earth faster than light, that there's nowhere to go but up. The second movie is probably the best movie in the franchise, but it also introduced us to super dickery, which would be a major motif in Superman movies going forward. I think the amnesia kiss in Superman 2 is just as big a WTF moment as Superman snapping Zod's neck in Man of Steel. Come to think of it, just like Man of Steel, Superman 2 features Clark taking petty revenge on some people who were mean to him in a diner, beating a guy up in Superman 2 and destroying his truck in Man of Steel. I'm not saying Superman can never be selfish and has to be morally perfect. Superman giving up his powers to be with Lois was selfish, but it didn't feel like it broke the character. Super dickery would continue to be a major motif in Superman 3 and 4, Man of Steel, and Batman v Superman. Unlike me, you like Superman Returns. What did you think of the first 4 movies? I have a soft spot for all 4 of them, but I definitely think Superman and Superman 2 are the best. And I will agree with you that I think Superman 2 is, of the original series, of the Christopher Reeve series, I think Superman 2 is the best one as well. I like the first one a lot better than you do. I agree, as I've said before, and as you pointed out in your question, I mean, I could do without the Krypton stuff. The Krypton stuff is only there so they could have Marlon Brando in the movie. Like, that's it. The Krypton stuff could go quite easily, and I don't think it would hurt the film for me. But overall, I like the first Superman. And I like Superman 2 even more. I think Superman 2 is a lot of fun. I think one of the reasons why the problems you point out with the super dickery don't bother me as much is because the tone of the movie is just a lot lighter, and Superman in general is not such a grim character, and he is not, generally speaking, a violent, capricious character like he is in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. But I agree with you. I don't like him beating up the guy at the diner at the end either. I just don't think Superman would do something like that. It doesn't ruin the movie for me, but it's a creative choice that I disagree with, and I think the movie would be better off without it. But yeah, I think Superman 2 is probably the best of the lot. Superman 3 is an interesting experiment, and it has its moments. I still think the junkyard fight in Superman 3, where Clark and Superman split off into separate people, and he has that sort of fight with himself to regain his goodness, is great, is one of the best scenes in any Superman movie. But the rest of the movie is not so good. I mean, like I say, it's an interesting experiment to do it as a comedy, to have Richard Pryor there. But yeah, Richard Lester is not... For my money, Richard Lester is not that great of a director. I don't really like his sense of humor. It's very, very slapsticky, and not in a good way, not in like a polished, skillful, like Chaplin-esque way, and kind of a sloppy cartoon way. So the comedy, which is all over Superman 3, is just not very, it's all very hackneyed and very trite and tired, and it's not funny. And in Superman 4 is, Superman 4 is a really, really good idea for a Superman movie that is executed with no finesse and no skill, and there's no reason to see it other than to get one last chance to see Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder and Gene Hackman play their roles. And that's really the only value that the movie has for me, is, it's the last go round for these actors playing these characters. But as a movie, it's awful. It's terrible. So that's what I think of the first 4 Superman movies. Next question is from Eric Allen, who says, all right, Steve, last time we talked about TV shows Star Trek actors did outside of the series. Now it's time for music. What is more terrible yet fantastic at the same time? Leonard Nimoy's The Ballad of Bilbo Baggins or Shatner's rendition of Rocket Man? Rock it, man. Are there any others that should be in this consideration? Thank you for doing all the great content you provide, and I hope you and yours are doing well. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you very much, my friend. I would have to go Rocket Man over the Bilbo Baggins song, because, like, the Bilbo Baggins song is bad, but to me it's bad in kind of like a cute, sweet, endearing way, right? Like, I don't really dig it because I don't really give a fuck about Bilbo Baggins to begin with. But it's just kind of a cute, like, oh, look, Leonard Nimoy singing a nerdy song about some nerdy shit that he likes. Like, it's kind of cute, right? Shatner's Rocket Man is in a whole different universe. It's so weird and uncalled for and inexplicable. It's like, why is he even doing this? Why is William Shatner even doing this? Which it's kind of amazing. Like, to me, it's in a class by itself. I can't think of any others right now. Like you said, are there any others? I know Brent Spiner did an album called "Oh Yellow Eyes Is Back," where he sang like standards. He did like Frank Sinatra songs, but I've never actually listened to that, so I can't tell you where that ranks. But in terms of the ones that I actually know, and of the ones that you mentioned, I think Shatner's Rocket Man has to take the cake for terrible yet fantastic at the same time. And also, in the interest of fairness, Shatner also did an album with Ben Folds called Has Been that is actually good. I will say unironically, I think William Shatner's Has Been album is good. There are some good songs on it. It's not great, and it's very reflective of, it's very revealing of William Shatner's personality. Because it's good in all the ways that he's good, and it's bad and embarrassing in all the ways that he as a person is bad and embarrassing and flawed and maybe needs to work on some shit. Although, let's face it, he's 90, he's not working on anything. So I think Has Been is actually a genuinely good album that Shatner did. And also his single that he did with Ben Folds on one of Ben Folds' previous albums called In Love, which is just amazing. It's one of my favorite songs. I love William Shatner doing the vocal for In Love. Shatner's Rocket Man is way more awesomely terrible than Nimoy's Bilbo Baggins song. Next question is from Leanne Rafferty. I don't know if you've addressed this before or not, but I've always wondered, is Picard keeping a fish in his ready room a violation of the Prime Directive? Or at the very least, enslavement of a lesser being for decorative purposes? Or is that fish secretly a member of Starfleet? Does it hold a rank? Is it a member of Section 31 sent to spy on Picard? The world may never know. Thoughts? Yeah, well, Patrick Stewart certainly agreed with you. He never spoke about it being a Prime Directive violation, and I don't think it would be, because I don't think we have any evidence that the fish is sentient. But Patrick Stewart felt that holding an animal captive like that, especially in such a small space, purely for decoration, was against the values that the show professed that the characters have. Like, he did not think Captain Picard, as we are told Captain Picard is and what his values are, would keep a fish in the ready room. And I kind of agree with him. I do think it's a little inconsistent. You know, it is a little strange to think that the enlightened, humane Captain Picard would keep a decorative fish in his ready room. That seems way too sort of elitist and hoity-toity, and just not in line with his humanistic principles. So yeah, I agree that it just doesn't seem like something Picard would have done. But Picard did do it. So we have to reckon with it. Like, we have to, well, why would he do it? And maybe it's because he is a little bit elitist. You know, I mean, he's a very egalitarian guy. He cares about equality, and he cares about justice, and is very impassioned and very noble and very moral. But he also was raised on like a big ass vineyard. You know, like, he might have a little bit of an elitist mindset, even if he doesn't realize it, and even if it doesn't come through very often. Maybe the fish is kind of an expression of that. Just my guess. Next question is from Andrew Michael. Good Stevening. I see what you did there. I like that. Hope you're keeping well, you goddamned beautiful bastard. So, canon in Star Trek is, let's be generous and call it slightly spongy. But there is one obvious, glaring, blatantly inconsistent entry to the franchise that violates established canon almost every other episode. Hell, it even violates its own canon from one episode to the next. Not only that, but the aesthetics are irreconcilably different from the other series. It just doesn't fit in. In my opinion, and the opinion of many fellow Trekkies, it's the worst series in the franchise. Thinking about it, I hold it in the same sort of regard that you do Voyager, which also played fast and loose with consistency. If you treat it as just excellent sci-fi, it's great. But it doesn't fit in with Trek very well. I know it's because TV standards and budgets vary with each era, but a lot of fans can't seem to get past it. Also, the diversity seems shoehorned in a lot of places. So my question to you is, do you also think TOS is the least canonically consistent series too? Wait, you didn't think I was talking about Discovery, did you? First of all, bravo, my friend. Well done. Very well done. Nicely written, nicely structured, nicely played. And I hope I read it properly, and I delayed the reveal just long enough. Yes, I agree with you. I think TOS is the least canonically consistent of all the shows. And there's a good reason for that. Not just the TV budgets of the time and that stuff, but also, I mean, they were making it up as they went along. And I don't hold that against them. And as someone who doesn't really care all that much about canon, it doesn't bother me. Because if there's something that pops up in classic Trek that is contradicted by later canon, I just say, well, it was the original show and they were just making it up. And the creators of the later shows said, oh, we're not dealing with that. We're changing that. That's fine. Like, that's completely fine. I have no problem with it whatsoever. I really like classic Trek. As I think I've said before, I love classic Star Trek. I don't think it's a bad show at all. I think it has a lot of really bad episodes, but overall, as a show from beginning to end, I think it's terrific. It's great fun. It has moments of great drama and pathos and insight. Created some incredibly memorable, indelible characters, and I just love it. But yeah, in terms of canon consistency, it's the worst. It's by far the worst. Yeah, absolutely. But there's very good reasons for that. And Andrew, I also wanted to tell you, you posted another question a little bit further down, and I didn't want to read it on the show, and I'm not going to read it on the show because I wasn't sure how much of that you wanted to share. Even though you did post it as a question in the call for questions post, you talked about something that you're going through in your life right now that happened all of a sudden that you weren't expecting, and it's obviously hitting you very hard. And I wasn't sure if you were okay with me talking about it on a live stream. So I didn't want to just throw it out there for everybody to know if you know, I wasn't sure that you were okay with it. But I just want to say in general, in answer to your question and in response to it, and you'll know what I mean, even if nobody else does, except the other patrons who saw your question. I really, really hope you're okay. I hope everything turns out well for everybody. And I'm really, really sorry that you're going through this and that this is happening and that it's happening the way it's happening, and that you're obviously very upset about it. All I say is I hope that you are okay and that everybody involved is okay soon, and that you can find ways in the near future to be happy. And I really, really appreciate everything that you said in your question about me and what you've taken from my videos, and I thank you for being there and for being a patron. And that's, you know, so yeah, and get in touch privately if you ever need to. That's all I'll say. So thanks, Andrew, a lot. I just noticed in the live chat, a super chat from Joe Black's Attacks. I didn't mention this because I was going through my spiel, but please hold super chats until I get through the patron questions, because I'm not always looking at the live chat. But yeah, I do not play Star Trek Online. So that answers that question. But no, hold the super chats until I get through the patron questions. I'm going to try to get through them as quickly as possible. So, next question is from General Contact Unit Problem Child, who says, it seems like every other Q&A thread, some random geek tries to talk you into adopting anarchism, and invariably you get hung up on the idea of direct democracy. You still believe there's some utility in having elected representatives. That being the case, I'm curious to know how you'd feel about the idea of liquid democracy. Liquid democracy is a sort of compromise between direct and representative democracy. In a liquid democracy, you can either vote on issues yourself, or you can get together with other people and pick a delegate to vote on your behalf. If this delegate at any time does something you don't like, you can decide they no longer represent you. After that, you can either go back to representing yourself or join a group supporting a different delegate. Suppose, for example, Hagerstown were a liquid democracy and you and your housemates pick Stuffy to represent you. Stuffy would then be able to go to a town assembly and vote on issues with the strength of 6 people. Suppose, also just for example, Stuffy does something that Millicent thinks is bad for the Husky community. She could take her voting power away from Stuffy. She could then go and vote on issues herself or get together with the other Huskies and pick a new representative who'd oppose Stuffy. I think there are other models of liquid democracy that are a bit different, but what I've described above is my preferred setup. What do you think? I think it's actually a really interesting idea, and I do think there's something. I feel like there's potential in the idea of allowing voters to choose their representatives in a way that is more fluid or more liquid, I suppose would be the term to use in this context, than just having an election every 2 years or every 4 years, right? Because the way we have representative democracy now is, we have an election, and whoever wins the election is my representative for my district for the length of their term, and for Congress, for House Representatives, it's 2 years. And if they do something that I think sucks, and I'm not happy with them being my representative anymore, I have to wait for 2 years, and then I have to vote against them, and then they might win the election anyway. So if there were some way that I could transfer my support away from them to another delegate or another representative, and that would then shift the proportional weight that representative carries in the legislature. Sorry, Ben, bumped you a little bit there. If there's a way that could actually work and would be effective and would be functional, I think that's a really interesting idea. I mean, I would need to know more like detail as to how it would actually work. But the idea, I think, is really provocative and really interesting, and I would be totally interested in exploring it. It's not something I would totally shut the door on at all. I think it's a really interesting idea. Yeah, for sure. Next question is from Eric Byer. Are the politics in your town as dire as you portrayed in Stephen Stuffy, where the mayor wants to privatize the local police force and subcontract security to his brother's company? No. They're not that bad. Actually, I think most people who live in very, very small towns like I do will tell you that the local government really doesn't do much of anything. That's an overstatement. The local government does do things, but on a day-to-day basis, a citizen of a small town is probably not even aware of the existence of their town government. I know I grew up in a little town called Clear Spring with a population of about 400. I never saw the mayor. I never heard anything about what the mayor or the town council was doing. Had almost no impact on my life, on my parents' lives. A lot of the government, the actual governing that we were affected by was handled by the county or by the state. So, the town, and here in Sharpsburg, it's a very similar situation. So, no, it's not nearly that bad. There have been some minor scandals in our local government over the years that have resulted in people having to resign or not seek re-election or whatever. And that's kind of the little tiny germ of truth that is the inspiration for the town government related stories in Stephen Stuffy the last couple years. But no, in reality, it is not nearly as bad as it is in the story. Thank goodness. The story is rooted in kind of a vague emotional reality about the town government and how it is populated and my feelings about it, but it's greatly exaggerated for comic effect. Next question from Charlie Schiarilli. Top 3 favorite characters from DS9. Oh, what a deceptively simple question. Top 3 favorite characters. Let's go Cisco, Odo, and Quark would be probably my top 3. It's tough to pick because when I start thinking about it, I think, oh, but I really love Dax. Oh, but I really love Kira. Oh, I really love Garrick. I love Dukat. If I'm going top 3, I think I'm happy saying Cisco, Odo, and Quark because they're all different from each other. They're interesting when we meet them, and they have such really fascinating character arcs that take them in such beautiful directions, and they all wind up in such interesting places at the end of the series that we might not have anticipated them ending up, at the beginning of the series. So that's what I'll say. Riley Dosh, how often do you watch Star Trek apart from researching new videos? You know, I go through phases. Right now, I'm watching a lot of it because my wife and I just started going back through Deep Space Nine again from the beginning. We're doing a Deep Space Nine rewatch again. I think it'll be the second or third time we've gone all the way through from start to finish. So we're watching Deep Space Nine every day, just purely for pleasure. So right now I'm watching a good bit. But I have gone through periods where almost all of it I was watching just for video research. So it depends. It kind of ebbs and flows. But right now, happily, I am watching Star Trek for my own pleasure regularly, and then watching a little bit extra when I have to do research for videos. And that's nice. That's how I like it. Isaiah Taylor. Okay, for positivity's sake, let's do some fan fiction for a Star Wars miniseries that I talked about that time. Here it is. At the compacted student living community of Gulf Breeze Student Living in Tallahassee, Florida, Devontae Smith hurriedly scurried about his room of 233A. He brushed past his study area, bath, and bedroom, all 1,000 square feet of it. Jedi trainer Dorthran, a rather withered and ashen man, observed him, still confused about what planet he was on. Devontae, clad in a black leather bomber jacket with NASA patches on them, a 1996 Bjork t-shirt, blue jeans, and a pair of old red Converses, went back to his bedroom to get his travel backpack. Then he froze. Dorthran, puzzled that he hadn't heard from him, walked back toward Devontae's bedroom. "We must hurry. It is not wise to toil with Master Yoda's time," Dorthran said. Then he saw him looking at his wall at some large posters, particularly one in the middle. In between a blast from the past and cruel intentions poster, Devontae looked rather pensively at. The poster read, "Contact," with two human beings looking skyward in front of what looked like communications devices. "What does this mean to you?" Dorthran asked. "You know, when I was bullied and isolated when I was little, I would always look at the stars and wonder, what is out there, and are we alone?" Devontae then glanced at Dorthran. "I thought something like this would never happen, but I don't think we're ready. Good thing you came to me first. I must be pretty damn special." "I've traveled to countless worlds and seen many things. Your world is unique, but not as bad as you think it is," Dorthran said. "Maybe you can give back to your world." "I don't know. Ignorance is very human. Who is this Yoda? We have a thing called a toy Yoda. Pretty good cars, though." Devontae and Dorthran hopped on Devontae's small Suzuki vintage motorbike and went off from the housing unit, and Devontae's life was about to change. Dialogue snippet, but it's something. What do you think? Any pointers? See you Sunday. I mean, I think there's promise there. I do think it needs, I think probably the more you write, the more you practice, the better you'll get. The dialogue feels a little clunky. And there are some spelling errors and some typos that you would need to proofread. But that's not the kind of thing that you want to worry about while you're still writing a first draft. Like when you finish whatever it is and you have a completed draft, that's when you want to go back and reread it and proofread it and copy edit it basically, and look for misspellings and using the wrong form of words and stuff like that. I caught a couple of those in there, but it's not really the time to worry about that yet. But just kind of park that in the back of your mind and know that you're going to have to go back and fix some of that. But yeah, I thought it's a decent start. It sounds like an interesting premise. This is the one you mentioned it before, where it's like a Star Wars, but Star Wars characters coming to our planet kind of crossover things. I think it's a neat idea. I would encourage you to keep writing it for sure. Next question is from Kevin B. Hey, Steve. Hope all is well with you. First things first, a huge thank you for the really awesome Trek Actually and Not Actually Trek Actually videos. They provided hours of enjoyment for the last couple of weeks for my vacation. Your encyclopedic knowledge of Star Trek amazes me. You're obviously a fan of sci-fi, and I assume other series movies. What do you think of some of the other stuff out there? Star Wars, Space 99, one of my all-time favorites. Battlestar Galactica, the original series. The Alien franchise movies, any of them strike your fancy? Or earn the scorn you have for Voyager? No, I mean, I love Star Wars, although my familiarity with Star Wars is limited to the movies and The Mandalorian for the most part. I haven't really watched the live action movies and The Mandalorian. I haven't watched any of the cartoons. I haven't read any of the novels. I don't think I've read any of the comics, at least not that I can remember. Maybe one or two a long time ago. But anyway, so Star Wars, I'm not like a big super fan. I love the movies, and I really love The Mandalorian, and that's about it. I remember the old Battlestar Galactica, but it's been a long time since I watched it. I think I've only seen a couple episodes of Space 99 and thought it was neat. Thought it was like a good sort of throwback. Well, it wasn't a throwback at the time, but now it feels like, like a throwback, like, a 70s sci-fi show. The Alien movies, I think some of them are really good and some of them are terrible. I think the first two are really, really excellent, and then it's kind of a downhill slide from there. But yeah, I of the ones that you list that I'm familiar with, I have varying degrees of like for all of them, for sure. Next question is from Andrew C. Hawkins. Is it even possible to make the kind of optimistic sci-fi that contemporary Star Trek haters seem to pine for so much, given the current American cultural environment? Or at least to do it convincingly? No. Well, I'll say this. It's possible, but I don't think it's responsible. And I don't think it's what Star Trek should be. Like Star Trek has become comfort food for a lot of us because we remember it from when we were kids, and we associate, like especially people my age, we associate Star Trek The Next Generation with like this nice warm blanket that you can cuddle up in and just enjoy it. And sometimes it gets political, but it's mostly just this comforting, reassuring thing. But that's not the only thing that Star Trek is or has ever been. I mean, Star Trek has always had a very, very pronounced strain of politics, of didactic, preachy, angry politics. It's been part of it from the very beginning. So to say that modern Star Trek just shouldn't be that it should just be this bland, optimistic future where it's like, where its job is to just reassure us that everything is going to be okay someday, that to me is not Star Trek. Star Trek is not there to pat me condescendingly on the head and say, oh, don't worry, little guy, eventually we'll figure all this out. Star Trek is there to say, hey, we need to figure this out. And if we ever do figure it out, things will get a lot better. But we need to figure it out. Like, your job is not to be sitting there on the couch going, oh, won't that be nice one day when we figure it all out? I'm comforted. Star Trek is trying to tell you, hey, these are problems in the world right now. And yeah, maybe they're just problems for aliens in our show, but really they're problems for you, and you need to do something about it. We need to do something about it. That's why we made the show about this topic, because we, the people who make the show, think this is important, and we want to stir you to action, or at least make you aware of it, right? So the people who are like, oh, it should just be this optimistic show that uplifts us and does nothing else. Like, to me, Star Trek has never been that. It has been that on occasion, but it has never been just that. And these people that are like, no, it should be just that. It's just like the people who complain about there being politics in Star Trek. And like, why do they have to make it political? I don't know what show you've been watching. Because, yes, I will agree completely. I've said it myself. The older Star Trek shows, especially TNG, they are comfort food for me. There are particular episodes of TNG that I can just turn on and enjoy. But I never felt like the franchise as a whole was that, or should be that, or owes me that. And it's weird to me that there are other fans who seem to be demanding that from the current crop of shows. I don't think that is what Star Trek has ever promised us. I mean, it has promised us a brighter future. It has said if we ever get our shit together, we can have a brighter future. And that bright future is still there. But it's never been about just being inspirational or optimistic, and that's it. So, yeah, I don't know. Lynn Kibblemom, hey Steve, I'd like to add to Kevin B's request to get your reaction to a couple of sci-fi fantasy shows that I really enjoyed back in the day. Alien Nation, the TV series, not the movie, which I wasn't crazy about, and Beauty and the Beast. The former had a lot of progressive political stories, mostly dealing with racism, as I recall, in the context of a buddy cop police procedural with excellent writing and acting. B&B was more of a romantic fantasy, but also had a law enforcement aspect, as Catherine was a district attorney. What I remember most fondly about it was the aesthetics of the underground world that coexisted beneath modern-day NYC, along with its mythic history. Really interesting world building. If you haven't seen them, then I'll just pass along my recommendation to check them out. Oh, and by the way, just wanted to say how much I'm enjoying the Ensign's log, Steve and Stuffy, and of course, all the Trek and political stuff you do. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I do remember the Alienation show. I don't remember it very well because I was young when it was on, but I remember watching it. I think I was maybe 11 or 12, maybe even younger. Maybe even 9 or 10. I can't remember when the Alienation series was on. But I watched it when it was originally airing on Fox. And I haven't caught any of it since in like reruns or streaming or anything. So I can't say what I would think of it as an adult, but as a kid when I watched it, I thought it was really interesting. And I remember the Beauty and the Beast show as well, but I never really watched it, so I can't say what I thought of that. But I remember Alienation, and at the time I thought it was really interesting, and I did watch it and like it. Next question from Roger Dietrich III. The new flag for the Space Force is being ridiculed for similarities to the Starfleet Command logo. I think it looks more like a Proto-Terran Empire logo. That, along with the apparent trend away from the ideals of Star Trek, I have to ask, are we living in the mirror universe? Well, if we are, you know what we have to do. We have to make sure that those of us who are alive in a few decades when the Vulcans show up, we need to make sure that Zefram Cochrane doesn't kill the Vulcan when he steps out of the ship. Because that's what fucks everything up, according to Enterprise, is Cochrane shoots the Vulcan guy when he comes out of the ship. So we gotta stop Cochrane from doing that, and maybe we can unmirror this mirror universe. You know, now that we know it's coming, now that we know what we're up against, right? Who am I kidding? We're terrible at long-term planning. We're not going to be able to pull that off. We're not going to be able to stop one particular person from shooting an alien, even though we have several decades of advance warning. We're doomed. We're definitely in the mirror universe. Next question is from Ahoy Here No. Let's not pretend that Trump won't try and cancel the election outright. COVID-19 is the perfect excuse. So when this happens, should China liberate you from fascism? Russia? Who should bring democracy to the USA again? You have oil, so there's a line. I'm kind of hoping the New Zealanders do that. I'm kind of hoping New Zealand just out of nowhere, raises a mighty army and crosses the sea and returns democracy to the United States. I would love for New Zealand to be our liberators, because New Zealand seems like a really nice place to live, and they seem for the most part like they have their shit together. I know I'm sure they have problems like every place, but they seem like they really have their shit together, especially compared to us. And all the people that I know personally from New Zealand, who are like acquaintances of mine, are cool people. I'm sure there are some assholes down there too, but the New Zealanders that I know are cool people. So I would love for them to bring democracy back to the United States. So please, Kiwis, get ready to save us in a couple of months. Okay? Thank you. I appreciate it. And they'll probably do it too, because they're such nice fellas. Connie Walker, a question about Star Trek the Motion Picture. Just recently rewatched, and I was puzzling why V'ger chose Ilea. Obviously, the machine is scanning the entire ship, then it picks her. Have you heard of a reason given by the writers, or do you have a speculation? Thank you. I do know the reason, or at least I have heard a plausible reason. I don't know if this is the actual reason. And also, this is a behind-the-scenes reason. The in-story reason is apparently it was just random. The actual in-story reason is that there's no particular special thing about Ilea. V'ger just chooses her at random. So he could have chosen, or V'ger could have chosen anybody. It chose Ilea. But the reason that Ilea got that part in the movie, in terms of the real-world production of the movie, is that when the characters of Ilea and Will Decker were created originally, they were going to be regular characters in the new TV series Star Trek Phase 2. And then, and at that time, not the entire original Star Trek cast had not been signed to come back. Especially Leonard Nimoy, I know, was not coming back to play Spock. So they were going to have Zahn as the new Vulcan science officer, and they were also going to have Will Decker and Ilea as new characters to kind of pad out the cast, because the entire original cast was not going to come back for Star Trek Phase 2, the TV series. But when Phase 2 was canceled and it became a movie instead of a TV show, they got the entire original cast signed to come back. So now they had the original cast back, and if the movie was a success and they made more movies after that, they could just keep making movies with the original cast from the TV show. So they didn't need Will Decker or Ilea anymore, but they still had these characters and they had still signed actors to play them. So in the movie, they wrote it so that Ilea gets killed and made into a probe by V'ger, and Will Decker loves her, and they both leave the ship at the end to bond with V'ger. So those characters are gone. So now the new characters have been written out in a really spectacular way. So if there is a sequel, and of course there was, we're back to just the classic Star Trek cast. So you've disposed of the new characters that you didn't need anymore. That is, from what I have understood, that is the creative thinking behind the way Ilia and Decker were written in the movie. They were originally supposed to be permanent regular characters on the TV show, but when it went from being a TV show to a movie, they had to get rid of them because they didn't need him anymore because they had the old crew back. So there you go. That as far as I know, that is the reason. But the in-universe reason is it was just random. It was just Ilia's bad luck. Glenn Helwig. Hey, Steve, just wondered if you've ever had the chance to visit Star Trek The Experience in Vegas when it was open. My wife and I went 4 times. My profile pic is from there. I enjoyed sitting in Quark's bar, which is where the pic was taken, and going through the rides and seeing props from all the series. I wish they wouldn't have closed it because it was such a pleasure going there and so nostalgic. Another question I have is, are you aware of the YouTube channel called The Seventh Rule? It was started by Aaron Eisenberg and Sirach Lawton. And Sirach is carrying it on after Aaron's passing with Ryan T. Husk, an actor that has appeared in Star Trek Continues. If you are aware, have you watched any of their videos? I enjoy them a lot myself. I have watched a little bit of The Seventh Rule, and I'm aware of it. And actually, they were very nice to respond to one of my tweets this week. I had a cool little Star Trek week on Twitter because I tweeted about Emissary, the pilot episode of Deep Space Nine, which I just watched because, as I mentioned earlier, we're going through and rewatching the show again. So we just watched Emissary earlier this week, and I tweeted and said I think that Emissary is the best pilot episode of any Star Trek show. And I also posted it on my YouTube community feed and on Facebook and other places. But on Twitter, Ira Stephen Bear, of all people, the showrunner of Deep Space Nine, retweeted me. And he said, "Hey, Steve, I don't know who you are, but I like your taste in Star Trek pilots." And that was an awesome moment because I was like, "Oh shit, the showrunner of my favorite Star Trek show just retweeted me. That's cool." And then under his retweet, The Seventh Rule replied as well and said, "We think you have great taste in Star Trek pilots too." So not only do I get a retweet and a mention from Ira Stephen Bear, but I also get a reply from the podcast that is co-hosted by the actor who plays Jake. So that was pretty cool. So yes, that is a long-winded and self-aggrandizing way of saying that I am very much aware of The Seventh Rule, and I think they're pretty cool. Shad Sterling, have you seen Mark Zakri's Space Command, a.k.a. the greatest Star Trek series you're not watching? Any thoughts? No thoughts because I haven't seen it. I'm aware of Mark Zakri. I'm kind of a fan of his. I've enjoyed his writing on other shows, and he's actually been responsible for some really great episodes of Star Trek. At least he has a story credit on Far Beyond the Stars. I don't think he actually wrote the shooting script, but he has a story credit for that, and that means one of the best episodes of any Star Trek show ever, and certainly one of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine. So he gets tons of respect from me for that. And also he wrote the Twilight Zone Companion, which is one of the coolest books ever and has had an honored place on my personal library shelf for many years. But no, I have not watched Space Command, unfortunately. My loss, I'm sure, but I'll make a note to try and check it out. David Colby, so have you seen She-Ra Season 5 yet? Did you cry? I cried, but they were all happy tears. P.S. In my Star Trek knockoff story, not only did I include the Remans, I also managed to slip in a "Hi Christopher, I'm Nero" reference, because that's the single best and most deranged part of the 2009 Star Trek movie. Like, this big bad villain with a spaceship made of swords, and he answers the phone like he's on a phone bank working for the Bloomberg campaign. It's bizarre. I love it. I agree. "Hi, Christopher, I'm Nero" is one of my favorite moments from the 2009 Star Trek movie as well. And I like that movie a lot, but that is definitely a high point for me. You're right. It's so weird. It's like, why is he doing that? I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I wish like big franchise movies, especially Star Trek movies, had more moments like that. I did watch the last season of She-Ra. I binged it last week. I did not cry, but I almost cried. I almost cried a couple of times. in the last episode, and I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody because I know a lot of people haven't seen it. I know some random geek is in the chat, and last I checked, he had not had a chance to watch it yet. So I'm not going to spoil anything except for this very, very, very minor spoiler. I'm just going to give you a line of dialogue completely out of context. Not going to tell you anything else, not going to spoil anything, but this one line of dialogue that probably got me the closest to actually crying of anything in the show. And the dialogue was this: I love you, Bo. I love you. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I was this close. I was hanging on by a thread. I was this fucking close. So yeah, I thought it was a really good season. John Burnsy, dictatorships do exist in the world, which is strange. After all, if people have realized that democracy is the right way to go, they should do it. I think in part it's because of history. China went from empire to communism, just another dictatorship in a very short time. Russia did much the same, and now they've slipped backwards with the new, let's eliminate the need for presidential terms. You might like Putin, but history has shown, both in Russia and long before the Middle Ages in Rome, that just because the leader is beneficial doesn't mean that all dictators in the future will be. Berlin had to be stomped and Germany torn asunder for their people to discover the benefits of democracy. Japan had to be bombed and Carthaged, unable to wage war or defend itself after electing a dictatorship. So, to my question, Starfleet, being a dictatorship, unlike I'd hope the Federation, should be a breeding ground for evil admirals. Goodfellas was able to keep Joe Pesci's character from true power mainly because he revealed what he'd do with small amounts of power. Many credit coaches today for dealing with the egos of athletes nowadays more than devising grand strategies, and God knows how admirals and generals can have egos, so why not a vast number of them? Who doesn't love the scheming character, oh, they laughed at me, but who's laughing now? Starfleet works best as a military dictatorship because of what it's tasked to do. That's the entire point of it. Captain Kirk, gentlemen, this isn't a democracy. Agree or disagree? I agree. I agree, actually. And yeah, that is a good explanation for for why there would be so many evil admirals. And it's also a great rebuttal for the people who say that, the more recent shows have ruined Starfleet by having it be, full of, morally compromised or morally flawed people. You could say, as I think I said a little bit in one of my recent videos, the mere fact that there are so many evil admirals in the institution is an indictment not only of the institution as a whole, but also it's kind of an indicator that maybe human nature isn't quite as evolved as we have been told it is, and as human characters in Star Trek have typically said that it is. Maybe human nature isn't all that evolved, and humans aren't as evolved as they like to think they are, which would be a very human thing, for humans to reach a point and say, boy, we sure are evolved and enlightened now, right? And it turns out they're not actually as enlightened as they think they are, right? So yeah, I agree. Maybe there are so many evil admirals because the structure of Starfleet incentivizes them to become evil admirals. That makes sense to me. That Brit nerd. Hey, Steve. So I know I joked about liking Man of Steel last time. I didn't think that film would become vaguely topical again so soon. So my question, what are your thoughts on the recently announced release of the Snyder Cut? I don't know if you broke your vow in your own B versus S review to stop watching DC films and have seen the released Justice League or not. For me personally, I don't think Man of Steel is a good movie, as I said last time, just slightly better than Superman Returns in my opinion. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure, as I like Henry Cavill, and there is a hint of a Superman who deserves better behind that face. Batman vs. Superman, however, despite 2 scenes in isolation that the movie doesn't earn or deserve, is a frustratingly awful movie. I found the Justice League we got to be a bland, confused, toothless venture. I have no personal desire to see Snyder's Justice League, as I expect his version of JL to be just as long, incoherent, grimly shot, and depressing as BVS. The man's outlook, directorial style, and vision are just plain morbid bleak, but it will be funny to see the car crash finally shown as intended. I think it's more concerning how this has come about. Snyder's fans have abused critics, Disney, Warner Brothers employees, and other fans to get this thing released, all the while being encouraged by Snyder himself. The fact that they, WB, bowed to this pressure sets a really troubling precedent for this kind of toxic fan power. And it speaks to a wider growing problem in society that you can get what you want, no matter how misogynistic, intimidating, and bigoted you are, so long as you shout loud enough in the right direction. Thanks for reading, and thanks as always for the hours upon hours of wonderful entertainment. Well, thank you for the lovely words, and thank you for the question. And all I can say is I agree. I haven't seen Justice League yet, to answer your question. I have not seen Justice. I have no plans to see it. I have no desire to see it. I have no desire to see the Snyder Cut. I might watch it at some point. There may come a time when, just to satisfy my curiosity and just sort of as a film school exercise, I might watch the theatrical cut and the Snyder Cut just so I can compare and contrast them. But I have no plans to do that anytime soon. And I mean, I certainly have no desire to see the Snyder Cut, or what is going to be called the Snyder Cut. And as far as your point about a toxic fan base being rewarded for shouting loud enough in the right direction, I agree with that completely. And I do think it sets a bad precedent. And I love the fact that you called. Look at the kitty cat in the background. Do you see Audie in the background? She's going to go hang out in the window, I think. So you won't be able to see her, but there she was. Hi, Audie. She's ignoring me. She's going to climb in behind the fan in the window and watch out the window, I think. But anyway, yeah, I'm glad that you pointed out that Zack Snyder has been egging it on, because he totally has. And he's a piece of shit for that. And he's a piece of shit director. So, yeah, all I can say is thank you for saying nice things in your question. And I agree with you. And I'll probably get around to watching the Snyder Cut at some point before I die. But I'm not in any hurry to see it. And yes, I agree. It sets a terrible precedent. Releasing it sets a terrible precedent. And I believe this is the last question. Yes, from John Gingras. Hi, Steve. I hope you and your family are well, especially Audie. Unsurprisingly, I've got a Star Trek question for you. If you were a Starfleet captain, in which circumstances would you violate the Prime Directive, and why? Well, that is a good question. I guess I would have to turn to, and everybody's fine, by the way, the family, Ashley and Audie, you just saw hop up in the window. She's fine. She's, as I predicted, she is sitting next to the fan, looking out the window. I would violate the Prime Directive whenever I felt it was necessary to do what was right. I mean, that's the example that has been set by the great captains of Starfleet. We've seen Picard do that on numerous occasions. We've seen Kirk do that on numerous occasions. We've seen Sisko do it. We've also seen Sisko do it for some less great reasons, and Sisko has done some less than great things that maybe weren't necessarily Prime Directive violations, but were still maybe some things that he shouldn't have done, but because he thought it was the right thing to do. So yeah, I mean, Starfleet says, hey, we don't want automatons. No offense, Data. We don't want people that'll just blindly follow orders. We want commanding officers that'll be able to think on their feet and adjust for variables in the field and do what they think is right to carry out the Starfleet mission. So that's what I would do. And if it meant violating the Prime Directive from time to time, I wouldn't feel empowered to just violate it whenever I wanted. Like, I would try to take it seriously. But if I was in a situation where I felt like I could not do the right thing without breaching the Prime Directive, I guess I would have to breach the Prime Directive, because that's the precedent that's been set. That's what my role models taught me, Starfleet. So don't get mad at me and court-martial me, okay? Court-martial all the other captains who broke the Prime Directive and taught me how to do it. You want to know where I learned how to do this stuff? From you, all right? I learned it from watching you. All right, that's it for the patron questions. Let's turn now to the live chat. Let me put the live chat on screen here. There we go. Oh, Leto Anor. Hi, Leto. Best living cat in the world. I agree. Audie is the best living cat in the world. So now we're going to pay attention to the live chat. So if anybody has any questions for me in the live chat, start posting them now, and I will hang out in the live chat for the rest of the show. And we'll go for, I don't know, how long do you want to go for? Maybe we'll go for another 45 minutes. We'll go until the end of the hour, and then we'll call it a night. Manda Panda, what did you think of The Case for Christ? The book or the movie? I wasn't a big fan of either. I did a whole series on The Case for Christ, the book, and I did a review of the movie. I'm not a big fan of either. Super chat from David Colby. Thank you, David. There is a character in season 5 of She-Ra who I think would have a fun conversation with Picard about their shared trauma. Should I write this fic? Ooh, yeah. And I think I know what character you're thinking of. So yes, absolutely you should write the fic, for sure. Question from some random geek. Should the institution of community be given power over the people they are supposed to protect? Doesn't giving that institution power the problem to begin with? Well, if you're going to protect people in the community and you're going to uphold the law or have a peaceful, just community, there will have to be instances where some people have power over other people, even if it's just situational. There she is again. There's Audie Kins. Hi, Audie. Hi, Audie Kins. So, I mean, are there better ways of empowering the institution than we have done now? Yeah, there must be. But, I mean, I think eventually you're going to now, Audie's exiting the room, everybody. Bye, Audie. But yeah, I think you're going to have some kind of situation where some people, even if it's just situational or temporary, some people will have some power over other people at some times. I just don't know how you can get around that. 255 AD said, how would you feel about making it the law that supermarkets have to give unsold food to food banks? I think that's a great idea. Orion McMurray, I tried to support you through Patreon. It would not allow me to do so at the $1 level. You might have to enter a custom pledge. Let me see if I can show you how to do that. Because the lowest level I have set is I think $5, but you can still enter a custom pledge. Let me see if I can figure that out. Let me see. Open link. Yeah, I think if you, yeah, we go. If you scroll down a little bit and you find the, let me just show it to you here. Hang on, let me go back. Okay. Okay, now see, there's my YouTube screen, but I'm going to change that here in a second. This is riveting, isn't it? Okay. Okay, so here is my Patreon page as seen in an incognito window where I am completely signed out. So here's what you do. This is the page that you see when you first go to my Patreon page, and you have the different levels, right? You don't have to choose one of those levels if you don't want. If you just want to sign up for $1 a month, which is totally cool, scroll down a little bit and eventually you'll get this pop down window and a button that says become a patron. Click on that and then you get the same tiers, but you can also go down and it says don't want to select a tier, make a custom pledge. Okay, can you see that? Yeah, make a custom. You can't see it because the window is, there you go, now you can see it. Make a custom pledge, and then you enter in your info, and you can become you can enter a custom pledge and become a patron that way. So that's how you do that. So thank you for asking, and hopefully that was of some help to you. You can enter a pledge of $1 a month, which is completely fine, but you need to do it as a custom pledge. And cool. I'm glad you were watching and you figured it out. So thank you for wanting to be a patron. I really appreciate it. Now let me look at everything that I missed while I was doing that little tutorial. Oh, Pete Brandon, favorite AEW star, Cody. Cody is my favorite wrestler in the world. Number 2, probably Mox. I love John Moxley. I think he's a fantastic champion. Number 3, I really love Nyla, even though I was happy that Nyla lost the title to Hikaru Shida because I think Shida is awesome as well. But I really love Nyla. I love Orange Cassidy. I mean, I love a lot of the main men and women on AEW, but my favorite is Cody. My favorite is Cody. Carlisle the Cinephile, do you have any interest in Avatar The Last Airbender? Not really. No, not really. Isaiah Taylor says Star Wars story is 11 pages long so far. That's awesome. That's great. Keep writing it. That's what I say. Keep writing it. 255 AD, was I right to think you'd pick Stuffy as your representative? Absolutely. Absolutely. Leto Anor, thoughts on the riots? I think the riots are justified, and I support the protesters. I think a riot is the least we have coming in this country for decades of police brutality and racism. So I think it's unfortunate, but I also think I'm on the side of the rioters, and I can't say I blame them at all. And I wouldn't blame them. I don't blame them. Robert Mills says, as you and Jason pointed out on the Ensign's log, Kirk would destroy a planet's belief system and not leave any kind of structure behind to help them. That's true, he would. He did that a couple of times, didn't he? Josh Colshan, what is your take on 7 of 9's paranoid theory of Voyager being stranded on purpose? I think it made a pretty good episode, and you correctly described it, that it was a paranoid theory. Some random geek says, are the riots the start of a revolution? What kind of world do you want to see after the revolution? I don't think the riots are the start of a revolution at all. But if there was a revolution, what kind of world would I want to see? I want to see a peaceful and just world, without poverty, without war, where people could live peaceful lives and be unmolested by violence and inequality and have free, fair opportunities. And yeah, that's the kind of world I would want to see. Red Spiral Ray, when I first jumped into the video, I thought that your Cisco figure was a badly made Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know what? I'll give you that one. It's not the best likeness of Avery Brooks in the world. He looks actually a little bit like, I forget his name now, and he's a great actor, and I can't remember his name, but he was the principal on the last season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He looks a little more like that guy than he looks like Avery Brooks. But yeah, he does, and maybe a little bit like Steve Austin with a tan. Like he's Steve Austin who spent a little too much time out on the ranch. Yeah. Ooh, Radical Bacon. What would you do if you got to throw the first pitch at a Suns game? Are you not notable enough with your shiny YouTube plaque? Oh, I would totally do it if they ask me, for sure. I don't know if anybody in the stands would have any idea who I was. I'm pretty sure nobody at the game would even know who the fuck I was. But if they invited me to do it, oh God, I would love to throw out the first pitch for sure. 255 AD. Oh, hang on. Benny Robinson, would you consider yourself an ally to the LGBTQ plus community? That's not for me to say. I would hope, I would very much like it if the LGBTQ community or people in the LGBTQ community considered me an ally, but I can't declare that of myself. I have to earn that through my conduct. So if I am living in such a way and behaving in such a way that they think of me as an ally, and I know that some people do, then that makes me really happy, and I'm very grateful for that. But I mean, I have to earn that. Like, I can't just claim that for myself. I would like to be. I would very much like to be. 255 AD says, the other day I got banned from a Twitch chat for misgendering a trans man without meaning to. I've been wallowing in shame all week. Is that self-indulgent? Maybe a little. I mean, getting banned sucks, but you know, you did it accidentally, and you know that you did something wrong. So hopefully you won't do it again, and you've been chastened, right? So you'll be better next time, which hopefully is the whole point. So maybe it's a little self-indulgent to be wallowing in shame all week, but I mean, it's nice that you feel a little bad about it, and it's nice that hopefully you've learned from it, and you'll be better from now on. Like, that's the whole point, right? Super chat from Pup Shepherd. I watch and like your Star Trek content. Arf wags, whatever that means. Thank you very much for the super chat and for saying that you watch my. I guess because of Pup Shepherd, Arf wags. It was like a dog thing. You're giving me a chipper little bark and wagging your tail. That's adorable. That's adorable. Thanks, Pup Shepherd, and thanks for watching my Star Trek content. And I'm glad you like it. I got it. It took me a while to get there, but I got it. Captain Terry Crews, DB Woodside. That's his name. Yes, DB Woodside is the name of the actor who I couldn't think of, who my Cisco figure looks a little bit like, for sure. Leto Anner, have you seen Stone Cold Steve Austin go after bigots on Twitter? It's amazeballs. Yes, it is. It is awesome. I still have wonderful thoughts about Steve Austin's offering his support of same-sex marriage before it became the law in this country, where he said, which one of these motherfuckers talked to God, and God told them that same-sex marriage was a no-can-do, which is just classic. I love it. Recently, I loved that he posted a selfie of himself with a mask on for the COVID thing, and someone responded to him saying, hey, come on, don't wear a mask. Pussies wear masks. Don't be a follower, blah, blah, blah. And Austin responded to the guy by just saying, shut up, dude, which is just like, yeah, for sure. Isaiah Taylor says, America's turning into Russia 1917. Well, I hope we end up better than they did. Let me see. David Colby says, I'm still in She-Ra mode. Sorry. That's okay. But do you think Star Trek should learn how to do the Borg Queen by aping Horde Prime? That is how you do singular leader of a hive mind. Oh, I do think Horde Prime is a more interesting character than the Borg Queen. Although I do have to tell you, I thought Horde Prime was fine. Like, I don't think he was a bad character at all. But he's just kind of, to me, he was just kind of scary bad guy. Like, I didn't really get a lot of depth from that character. I mean, they tried, and the setup, his relationship to the different, to his brothers, to the clones, I thought was interesting. I thought Wrong Hordak was fantastic. I thought Wrong Hordak was a great character. And I thought the little bit of characterization that they gave to Hordak at the end was cool, that they had a little thread that they kept going with him, and that got paid off at the end. And I loved Mermista at the end saying, so we're all okay with this? Like, I loved all of that. But I wasn't like a huge fan of Horde Prime as a villain. I thought he was fine. I thought he was an acceptable villain, but I didn't think he was like a fantastic, like great villain. But I get what you're saying about how he's like a more interesting version of the Borg Queen. I do agree with you on that. 255 AD says, do you think your Cisco being a bit off might be down to the manufacturers being like close enough? Who can tell black men apart anyway? No, not really, because I have a Geordie as well, and Geordie looks more or less like LeVar Burton. I mean, he looks about as much like LeVar Burton as the Riker looks like Jonathan Frakes and the Picard looks like Patrick Stewart. So I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it might be just they just didn't come up with a good mold for Cisco. I don't think it's necessarily racism. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. Who knows? You can never tell. Maybe it is. It always might be. But judging by other figures that I have that are in the likeness of black people, I don't think I don't think that's the conclusion I would jump to. Super chat from 1234 Tom H. Steve, glad you are okay. College student killer was seen near Hagerstown, Maryland before he was caught. With that being said, and then I guess it continues. Yeah, we had a murderer on the loose in Hagerstown. Yeah, we did. This is a funny story. So there was a murderer on the loose in Hagerstown who was arrested, and as far as I know, he didn't hurt anybody while he was down here. He did his murdering before he came to Hagerstown and got caught. He was a guy who grew up on the same street as the Newtown shooter. So a neighbor of the Newtown shooter grew up to also be a murderer, and then he fled from law enforcement, made it down here from Connecticut, down here to Maryland, and got caught in Hagerstown. That's a life that has gone off the track in every possible way. Radical Bacon, Jonathan Frakes is now Frosted Frakes. Yes, indeed he is, and he looks pretty good, I think. Red Spiral Ray says, a good friend and I were discussing some things about life, and she believes society is broken. I'm starting to think the same. Do you feel we're getting to that point? I mean, in certain ways, I think we're well beyond that point. I think there are certain things in society that desperately need to be repaired, for sure. Yeah. Dataport Doll, if this is the Mirrorverse, Does that mean if Jack kills you in the next Steven Stuffy that we all move up in rank? Yeah, I guess that's what that means. Yeah. So, God, thanks for giving. I hope Jack doesn't watch this. Yes, that's what it means. That's what it means. My flavored seltzer is warm because I've been doing the show for so long. Scroll back up and see if there's any questions I missed. Who is Willow says, I'm a bit surprised we haven't seen a Star Trek series do an episode where our heroes have to deal with a Starfleet officer killing a native citizen of a planet and the fallout that results. Yeah, they haven't done that, I don't think, but they have done... they did the episode in the first season of TNG where Wesley breaks a rule on a planet where the punishment for breaking any rule is death. So it's not that Wesley kills somebody, but he commits what for them is a serious crime and then has to deal with it. But yeah, that would be interesting to have a Starfleet officer kill someone on another planet and have to, you know, what justice system do you try him in and whatever. Trina Conrad says, what is your go-to episode of Deep Space Nine? Like the episode you can watch over and over again. For whatever reason, it has turned out to be Sword of Kahless. I've probably watched Sword of Kahless more than any other single episode of DS9. Just wait till this fucking jackass in the motorcycle gets out of the way right outside my window. If I had a magic wand, there'd be no more motorcycles. I hope all you people who ride motorcycles enjoy it while it lasts, because as soon as I graduate from Hogwarts and I get my wand, swish, boom, no more motorcycles. Because that's just obnoxious. That out there right now, like the blah, 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 that's just fucking obnoxious. There's no need for that. There's no reason for that. I know it's because it's loud so we can see them. Well, maybe drive a car. If you drove a car and you didn't just drive like an engine with wheels, then it wouldn't be such an issue as to whether or not people could see you, right? Because you'd be protected in a car and it wouldn't necessarily be fatal if somebody just nudged you a little. Like nobody made you drive a motorcycle. You chose to do that. Anyway, I hate motorcycles. Super chat from 1234 Tom. Funny post. You said it was hot in your room. Au contraire, Steve. Your hairy chest is plenty to see. Can you take your shirt off and pretend you're a baseball fan doing the wave? Thank you for the super chat. But no. I will not do that. Anyway, yeah, Sword of Kahless is my go-to DS9 episode, Trina. It's a really fun episode. It's got some great overacting from John Colicos and Michael Dorn, and I think it's a terrific episode. Not the best episode of DS9, not my favorite episode, but the episode that I have probably watched as a one-off more often than anything else. And what is this guy waiting for? Like, you got your fucking ice cream. Just go. Just pull away. There's no traffic. There's no traffic on the street. Like, just fucking go. Anyway, some random geek says, Jack is drunk right now, and besides, why the fuck would I watch Steve Shives' damn stream? Yeah, that's good. That sounds like Jack. Red Spiral Ray, what if the U.S. disbanded and became 50 individual countries? Is it possible that could work? The USSR fell apart and the British Empire fell apart. Maybe we're next. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Like, I don't know if it could work, I suppose. Isaiah Taylor, never seen so much anger like this. Also, fuck Franklin Graham. Yeah, well, fuck Franklin Graham just as a standing order, I think. But yes, in particular, at this point, yes, fuck Franklin Graham. Josh Colson says, was there ever an episode where an officer manipulated a native race as a god, a la Stargate SG-1? Garth of Izar kind of went in the original series. What was it? Whom Gods Destroy? Garth of Izar kind of went a little cuckoo and had kind of a god complex. That's probably the closest I can think of right now. Comrade Ibot, even my little Vespa, it's so quiet, you wouldn't notice it till it was in your living room. Well, if it's quiet, that's fine. Silent electric motorcycles, some random geek, I guess they're okay. It really gets like, I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. Radical Bacon, yes, some of you have already seen me shirtless. I've been shirtless in a couple videos, so it's nothing to write home about. David Colby says, have you ever seen Captain Simeon and the Space Monkeys? It has Michael Dorn and Jerry Doyle, dueling security chiefs. I've never actually watched it. I know of it. I remember when it was on, but I never actually watched it. 255 AD says, what's the difference between aliens? Just a second. Hey, they're gone. Isn't that great? You'll probably still be able to hear them until they're about 500 miles away. Anyway, what's the difference between aliens kidnapping Starfleet personnel and aliens imprisoning them based on violating arbitrary laws? Good question. I guess, you know, I think there is some kind of precedent in Star Trek where if a Starfleet officer violates the law of another planet, like that they are subject to the laws of the planets that they visit. I think that's been established a couple of times. Yeah, so. 255 AT says, question, remember when we had serial killers rather than mass shooters? Yeah, those were the days, wasn't there? Those were the days when evil people would just kill maybe one person at a time, and they do it over and over again for a few years until they got caught. But it was just one or two at a time. They didn't just like walk into a school or a mall or something and just blow everybody away. Those were the good old days, you know? Killers back then had some pride. They knew how to have a hunt. They didn't just walk in and ventilate everybody, right? The good old days of murder. Plato Henry, do you need somebody to take care of that biker outside? I'm going to say something to Toby Benson after the show. I'll let him know, and maybe he'll take care of it for me. David Colby says, Captain Simeon and the Space Monkeys is surprisingly good for an incredibly goofy kid show. I mean, any kid show that makes an I have no mouth and I must scream reference has some redeeming values. I'll go with you on that. Carlisle the Cinephile says, what was the weirdest encounter you had while working at that truck stop? I just got a job at a gas station, and I've met some very weird people. Okay, so there was this guy who used to come in. He would come in, and I worked at the truck stop. The truck stop where I worked at, I worked there for 5 years. And there was this guy who came in once a year, every year, for almost every year I worked there. And he was kind of like, he was always just passing through. Like, he wasn't from the area. He was always passing through. And he was almost always, he was a white guy with like long brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, thinning on top, middle-aged, you know, maybe a little bit older than I am now. And always was dressed in plain gray sweatpants and a black overcoat, like a duster, right? That was what he was always wearing. And he was a full-on, dyed-in-the-wool, down to his bones, paranoid conspiracy theorist. He told me once, he said, this was in the years like after 9/11. This was like 2001 and after. So 9/11 happened, and then it was very much on everybody's mind for a long time. And this guy had this clipping of a Newsweek article that was, it was about something kind of 9/11 related, but he had taken it, he had torn it out of the magazine, and he showed it to me. He said, here, I want to show you something. This is a script, is what he called it. He said, this is a script. And he had circled random words and connected them, like in a beautiful mind. And to him, this had like secret meaning, this very, very important hidden meaning that he had deciphered in this code that he imagined he saw. And I don't know if he was dealing with some kind of mental illness or what, but to date, he is the only person I have met in my life who was a genuine delusional paranoid conspiracy theorist. And I'll never forget him. I think I never learned his first name, but he told me his last name was Bridges. And he was by far the most interesting person I ever encountered at the truck stop. Radical Bacon says, what would you think of a Star Trek series that was just short treks? Like a bunch of one-off stories, maybe following established characters like Molly grows up and O'Brien is confused, Jake's writing career, Bashir and Dax. I would love that show. I would watch the hell out of that show. It sounds like a really cool idea for like an anthology Star Trek comic. And if it were a TV show, that would be even better. I would love that show. Just like a series, just like a Star Trek anthology series where it was just standalone episodes without a recurring cast. That sounds like a great idea. I would watch the hell out of that show, for sure. Absolutely. Carlisle Cinephile says, I once had a guy ask me to give him free cigarettes, and when I repeatedly told him no, he said, "What if I told you I was Jesus?" Yeah, that I believe every word of that. I believe that. Leto Anor, that hard time story you linked in the chat is hilarious. I read that earlier today. For those of you watching who haven't seen the link, Leto just shared a story from Hard Times in the chat. Hard Times is a satirical website, and I'll show it to you. Here it is. The headline is, "Opinion, maybe that police station shouldn't have broken the law," which is absolutely perfect. I read that earlier today. I thought that was hilarious. Thank you for sharing it with us in the chat. Red Spiral Ray says, have you ever had an encounter with a lot lizard at the truck stop? I have not personally, no, but we did have lot lizards at the truck stop where I worked. I never had an encounter with one personally. But yes, there were lot lizards who were known to operate in the parking lot. And for those of you who are not in the know on truck stop lingo, a lot lizard is another way of saying a sex worker who works a truck stop. Yeah, and now he's a Pizzagator, probably. Who is Willow says... Brian Fuller recently revealed that the Voyager episode Year of Hell was originally pitched as an entire serialized season of the show. Do you think that would have worked? Without the reset button at the end, I think it would have worked great. I think the thing about Year of Hell that irritated me the most was the reset button at the end. If they had done it as a serialized season and had gotten to the end and gotten out of it in some way without just going back and resetting everything, then yeah, I think it would have been tremendous. I think it would have been great. Get rid of the reset button and stretch it out over more than 2 episodes, and it's a great idea for a story. Eric Allen, Super Chat, thank you very much. The question is, what are your thoughts on Sam Harris? Frankly, I think he's a DB. I agree with you. I think Sam Harris is a piece of shit. I think he's not nearly as smart as he thinks he is, and certainly not nearly as smart as his most devoted followers think he is, because there are some people who love Sam Harris who think he's even smarter than Sam Harris thinks he is himself, which is like off the charts, because Sam Harris is as full of himself as anybody I've ever seen. I think he's an asshole. He's a sexist. He's a racist. He's anti-Muslim. He's just a prick. He's has massive blind spots to his own privilege and his own prejudice, and seems to operate as though he is immune from all of the blind spots and prejudices that everybody has to deal with. Like, he seems to have convinced himself that he has thought his way out of all this stuff. And he's aware of all his biases while he demonstrates repeatedly that he's definitely not. No, I'm not a big fan of Sam Harris at all. Not at all. Yeah, Leto Anor, Sam, actually, black people are dumb. Harris. Yeah, exactly. Sam, Charles Murray, the guy who wrote The Bell Curve, is some kind of scholar in exile who has been wrongly judged by, come on, if you're seriously going to go on a show in the 21st century and say Charles Murray got a raw deal, he was unfairly treated. Charles Murray, the guy who wrote The Bell Curve, has serious work that deserves to be reevaluated and isn't a fucking racist. I don't know how any self-respecting person could do that. Sam Harris, however, is way, way too self-respecting. and he has done that quite openly. So yeah, a DB, a douchebag. A douchebag is a DB. Yeah, I agree. Sam Harris is Sam Harris is not good. You're not good. You're not good, Sam Harris. Radical Bacon, we had a saying at Nuke School, just because you're smart doesn't mean you can't be stupid. Boy, those are words we should all live by, don't you think? Daryl Letts, have you ever met a real misanthrope? I mean, I've met people who had misanthropic attitudes. I don't know if I've ever met someone who I would describe on the whole as a misanthrope, but I've met people who had, who were very misanthropic from time to time. Sure. 1234 Tom H, another super chat. Thank you again. Says Nielsen can barely keep track of cable TV with regular TV. Infamous people meter. How are they going to keep track of all these new streaming services? Well, I don't think they are. I don't think Nielsen is keeping track of them. I think the streaming services so far are keeping track of themselves and are mostly being very close-lipped about what information they release. I mean, who knows? Like, Netflix will sometimes tell us what the most popular shows are, but I don't know if they ever release raw data, do they? Nor does Hulu, nor does Amazon Prime, nor does CBS All Access. I don't think any of them ever release like raw viewer data. Yeah, and I don't think Nielsen tracks them. Does it? I don't think it does. I don't think it ever has. But yeah, it's an interesting. Wooga says DB is dude bro. Yeah, dude bro. Dude bro could also be DB. And yes, it could be a better term than douchebag because douchebag implies that they serve a purpose and have ever been functionally useful to anyone with a vagina. I like that. That's good, and which is probably not the case. And also, like a douchebag itself is a very useful implement for people who have vaginas and have need of a douchebag. Like, it shouldn't be an insult. We shouldn't associate a useful tool for people with vaginas with an insult. So you're right, douchebag is kind of a problematic insult. Although Radical Bacon muddies the waters by pointing out that douches are bad for vaginas. So now I don't know what the fuck to think. Yeah, and Eric has clarified and says by DB they meant douchebag in the question. So DB meant. See, I was right. Whether douchebag is something we should be saying or not, I was right that DB was douchebag. So thank you, Eric. Thank you very much for the vindication and the validation. Galacti Central Comment Bureau. In your video about your version of the final ending for Enterprise, you didn't mention much about Dr. Phlox. Have you had any subsequent thoughts about his end for the story in the finale? I guess I always kind of thought he would go back to his people, like he would be transferred to some other assignment in the medical exchange program, or he would go back to Denobula, something like that. But I haven't really given a lot of thought to it. Comrade Ibot says, I agree with Bacon. Testing says it can throw off internal pH, making infections easier. Well, there you go. See, I don't think I knew that. So thank you for the information. Patrick Wall, what is your favorite Riker moment? Ooh, it's tough to pick a favorite Riker moment. I love the end of Best of Both Worlds Part 1. Mr. Worf, fire. That's a great one. It's hard to beat that one. But I also love First Contact when he comes up to Worf after Worf is rescued from the Defiant. And Picard says, Mr. Worf, we could use a hand at tactical. Worf goes to the tactical station, and Riker comes up to him and says, you do remember how to fire phasers, don't you? Riker. You got Rikered. That's a good one. I think my favorite, and there are some moments in his episode of Picard as well that I really, really love. But I think my favorite Riker moment is from Chain of Command Part 2, when Jellicoe comes in to get him to fly the shuttlecraft for the mission to lay the mines to stop the Cardassians. And they have a really nice scene where they kind of get things off their chest, and they each say why they don't like each other. And it's a really good scene for both characters. And then Jellicoe says, I'm not going to order you to do this. And Riker gets this massive, all-time classic shit-eating grin on his face. And he says, then ask me. And Jellicoe swallows his pride. To his credit, Jellicoe swallows his pride. And he says, will you fly the mission, Commander? And Riker says, yes. And then Jellicoe turns to leave, and right before he walks out, Riker says, you're welcome. That's my favorite Riker moment. Ooh, Leto Enter just shared a story about apparently the White House went briefly on lockdown after there were protests nearby. This is from The Hill. The White House went into a brief lockdown Friday evening as protests over the death of George Floyd raged nearby. One video showed a man with a bandana around his neck spray painting "Fuck Trump" onto Freedman's Bank building. Well, good for them. Good for them. I mean, they're protesting in the right place. That's for sure. Thanks for sharing that, Leto. Good for them. I hope nobody gets hurt. Especially the protesters. Yes, Leto, Riker is a fuckboy. I know. Red Spiral Ray, what if Riker had a midlife crisis and became a biker? A real middle-aged dad. Riker didn't become a biker. Riker became a baker of pizza. So, no Riker biker, Riker baker. Dataport Doll, you're right. Riker's shit-eating grin and chain of command can't be beaten. I agree completely. 255 AD says the other day on the Majority Report said maybe Biden will be forced into social democracy if there's another depression. Please ask the chat if they think that's plausible. Okay, chat, do you think it's plausible that Biden will be forced into social democracy if there's another depression? I think it is. I think it's plausible. Orion McMurray asks, do you play a musical instrument? I do not. I am not nearly talented enough to play a musical. And look, there's Radical Bacon answering for me already. She knows me. I do not. And, okay, a kazoo. I play a kazoo. You know, I put some wax paper over a comb. I can play that motherfucker all night. I cannot play a real musical instrument. Carlisle the Cinephile, you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? I haven't. Funny you should mention, I haven't. 255 or some random geek says, question, has the media glorified bad cops too long? Does anybody really want a real life Dirty Harry? Yeah, I agree. I think they have I think they have glorified bad cops for too long. I think they've glorified cops in general for too long. I don't think it's fair to say that expecting anything progressive from Biden. I think Biden's platform right now is progressive. It's just not nearly progressive enough. I mean, will he be as progressive as I want him to be? Probably not. Will he be as progressive as this moment in history needs him to be? Probably not. I hope so. But no, I don't think it's fair to say that he's not progressive at all. He's a little progressive. I mean, he's not a conservative, but he's not nearly as progressive as I would like him to be or as he needs to be. David Colby, do you think Catra would like Earl Grey tea, or would Picard have to go straight to the wine? For my fan fiction, I mean. That's the character I was thinking of. I think Picard could offer her tea, sure. And maybe he would offer her tea, but then she would see the wine like on the shelf behind him and just go straight for it. Super chat from 1234 Tom H. Again, thank you very much. Minneapolis Now or Chicago 1968? I mean, hopefully Minneapolis Now has the historical impact that Chicago 68 had, right? Hopefully there are some changes coming out of it. And it's like a mark in history that we look at and say that was a time when maybe people woke up and some things started to change. Sean Hartley says, do you wish we got to see more of the Tholians? I mean, they're okay. I don't particularly need to see any more of them, but I think they were an interesting alien. I mean, we got to see a little bit more of them in Enterprise, right? Yeah. Leto, I agree with you. Clint Eastwood is a fantastic actor and a fantastic director, and he's made some amazing movies. But yeah, fuck Clint Eastwood too, because Clint Eastwood is a right winger, and it took him 4 years before he finally gave a very, very weak, tentative, half-assed, rejection of Trump after all this. So yeah, fuck Clint Eastwood. Radical Bacon says, I've been watching DS9 with a friend. It's his first time through. We're almost at the uniform change. I am like, wee! Yeah, you know, because I love those first contact uniforms. Like, I love, like, these uniforms. I love these. These are my favorite Star Trek uniforms of any era ever. The Discovery interpretation of the classic Trek uniforms is damn close. But these are my favorite Star Trek uniforms. So when First Contact came out, and then Deep Space Nine was on, and there was like that lag of about a month before the characters on Deep Space Nine started wearing the uniforms. Oh my God, I was like so anxious to see them switch uniforms. I was so excited. Had nothing to do with the story, had nothing to do with the characters. I was just so excited to see them start wearing the gray uniforms because I love these uniforms. Yeah. Oh, Tombstone the Dead Man is here. Hey, Tombstone. What do you think the chances are of these current events being a paradigm shift? I mean, I don't know. Oh, God, I mean, I hope so. Like, the thing is, and you probably know this as well as I do, if not a hell of a lot better than I do, there have been times in the past, in the recent past, right, where it seemed like we were at that point. Like Freddie Gray. There were riots, there were protests, and we thought maybe this is it. You know, Michael Brown, there were riots, there were protests. We thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is the moment when enough people start paying attention and we finally say we have to do something about this. You know, Trayvon Martin, we thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. And here we are. You know, not only do people still have to protest over this shit, but it's because this kind of shit still happens. Like Eric Garner was murdered by cops on video. What happens a few years later? You know, in Minneapolis, another black man gets murdered by another cop. And he even says, I can't breathe. Like, the exact same thing happens again. So, I mean, I hope it's a paradigm shift. I mean, I really, really hope so, because I would hate to think that, I would hate to think that things are going to get a hell of a lot worse. I mean, I can't bring myself to have a lot of faith. But I hope so, man. I really hope so. I'm glad to see Tombstone getting some love in the chat. Tombstone is awesome. I still listen to The Sixth Extinction. That's such an awesome fucking album. I have that in my playlist, and I still listen to that a lot. 255 AD says, who's the weirdest person you met when you did whatever? Do questions like that invite you to mock mentally ill people? Perhaps. I guess I should be careful about that. I think that is that's valid to point out. I mean, I did mention that I thought Bridges may have been struggling with some mental illness, and hopefully I wasn't mocking him too much when I was describing him. But yeah, I think maybe they do, sort of. And Tombstone agrees with me about the uniforms. I love those uniforms. But the uniforms, the Discovery version of the classic Trek uniforms are really, really cool. Like, I'm really looking for. I mean, I'm looking forward to the Captain Pike series for a lot of reasons. But one of the main reasons why I'm looking forward to the Captain Pike series is to get to see everybody wear those uniforms, because I love that version of the Enterprise, and I love those uniforms. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I still like these uniforms the best. They just look so cool. They're like a perfect compromise between like something that, if you squint, kinda sorta looks like a legitimate military uniform, but also still looks like Star Trek pajamas. Like they're like Star Trek pajamas, but a little more professional and a little more serious. I just love them. I love them. Radical Bacon, Gabriel Bell 2024. Yeah, I mean, maybe he jumped the gun. I saw somebody tweeted, or no, somebody left a comment on one of my videos, I think maybe, that said Deep Space Nine got it wrong. It wasn't Gabriel Bell, it was George Floyd, and it wasn't 2024, it was 2020. Let's hope, like Tombstone said, I hope it's a paradigm shift. I hope some good comes from it. I hope there is some serious and lasting change as a result. Seal0626, somehow I missed that you're a costume nerd. Yeah, I've mentioned it a time or two in videos, but I've never made like a big deal about it. But yeah, I'm a huge Star Trek Starfleet uniform nerd. Not necessarily a costume nerd overall, But for Starfleet uniforms and maybe for like superhero outfits, like for superhero costumes a little bit, for sure. David Colby says, best Star Trek uniforms in order. Wrath of Khan era red uniforms, then gray uniforms from First Contact DS9, then the rest of them because they're all equally not as good as those. I love those red uniforms too. Oh boy, I love the Wrath of Khan red uniforms too, and for similar reasons as I said, I like these uniforms. That they're close to being looking like legitimately military uniforms, but they still are just goofy enough that you're like, oh, it's Star Trek pajamas, right? I love those uniforms too. I love the whole aesthetic. I love the Wrath of Khan, classic movie era Star Trek aesthetic. It's my favorite Star Trek. I love the tone. I love the look. I love the way the ships look. I love the way the bridges look. I especially love the Enterprise bridge from Star Trek 6. I think that's one of my favorite Star Trek sets. Definitely one of my favorite bridge sets. And I love the uniforms. I love those red uniforms for sure. Super chat from NS Mike 87, who says, and thank you for the super chat, by the way, my friend. In the DS9 doc, there's a part where Sirach points out that Rodney King's beating was on TV then, and black people are still getting beaten on TV now. Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I mentioned in my little rant at the beginning of this live stream, before I started answering questions, I didn't mention Rodney King. I very easily could have. I mentioned Amadou Diallo, which was 21 years ago. And that kind of shit is still happening. And cops are still, for the most part, not being convicted, not being punished for it. Like, think about that. Amadou Diallo, 41 shots, was shot in New York City in a hallway right outside his apartment building. 41 times by 4 police officers who had him cornered. And he was unarmed. And even if they thought he had a gun, he was reaching for his wallet. Even if they thought he had a gun, they had him outnumbered 4-1. And they unloaded on him and shot at him 41 times and hit him 19 times, which means that only 19 of those 41 bullets actually hit him. The rest of them went God knows where else. Luckily, they didn't kill anybody else. And that was 21 years ago. And there was a national outrage about it at the time. And like I said, Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about it. And it's still happening. Like, it's still happening. Amadou Diallo should have been a paradigm shift. And it wasn't, Rodney King should have been a paradigm. Rodney King in 1991. I was 11 years old. I think I was actually only 10. I don't think I had turned 11 yet. I was 10 years old when Rodney King happened. When Rodney King happened, like he's an event. Rodney King's a person. When Rodney King was beaten by a gang of cops, that should have been a paradigm shift, and sadly it wasn't. So, God damn it, I hope so. I really hope so. I hope it's a paradigm shift now. Red Spiral Ray says, if Decker and V'ger merged, then doesn't that mean he's still alive in some form or another, traveling the cosmos? I guess so, yeah. I think so. 255 AD says, how does your wife feel about having to periodically rewatch Star Trek shows? I don't think she minds. I think she's not as big of a Trekkie as I am, but she likes Star Trek. And thankfully, she especially likes Deep Space Nine. And we're going through a Deep Space Nine rewatch. So that's cool. No, she doesn't mind. She doesn't mind at all. Who is Willow says, what do you think of a Star Trek series about a ship full of outcasts? Think a Vulcan counselor, a Deltan security officer, a science officer who was the first of their species to enlist in Starfleet. I think that's a good idea. It's kind of where they're going with Picard. It seems like that's kind of a motley crew. It's not as diverse in terms of species as you proposed there, but it's kind of what they're going for, it seems like. But whether it's Picard or some other show, I think it's a cool idea for a show. Absolutely. Some Random Geek, what should Social Justice Alchemy do for our 100th episode? On June 6th, well, you should celebrate the brave sacrifice of the men who stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Obviously, that's what you should do, you unpatriotic fucks. Where's your national pride? It's D-Day. That's what you do. That's the only thing you do on June. It was June 6th, right? Yeah, it's June 6th. I don't know. You're probably not going to do a D-Day show. That's. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea. Late to Adder, my wife is cool. My wife is really cool, and I think you and her would be awesome BFFs. She's great. She's awesome. Yeah, tubes. I mean, I was, like I said, I was only 10 or 11 at the oldest. I remember it pretty vividly too. I mean, I remember watching it on the news. I remember it was a big deal. Like, it was a big deal to us white kids in rural Western Maryland at the time. You know, so it was a big deal for everybody. I remember it vividly, and I wish it had made more of it. I wish it had resulted in more change than it did. You know. Patrick Wall, at some point, will we get Toby Benson's thoughts about these cops? Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, for sure. I think Toby Benson does need to give his thoughts about the cops. Yeah. Wooga says, I just gifted my 11-year-old son with a box set of the first 10 Trek films. Am I dadding correctly? Absolutely. How could you be dadding any better? 255 AD says, would you rather enlist in Starfleet or go to the Academy? Enlist. Yeah, I know, some random geek, you're anarchist. You don't believe in nation states. I know. But you still need to celebrate our brave men who stormed the beaches of Normandy and fought for you'd be speaking German if it wasn't for them. God damn, the greatest generation. God damn it. No, I don't know. Do whatever you want for your 100th show. Congratulations, by the way. Congratulations on your 100th show. That's really cool. What would Toby Benson do in Minneapolis? He would protect the rioters. He would stand between. He would probably do a little bit of looting and a little bit of rioting his own self, but you know that he would have his own TBIB security guard force that he has trained and deployed from time to time, and he would send them out to Minneapolis, to protect the protesters. That's what Toby Benson would do. And I mean, he'd probably find a way. If he could find a way to make a buck while he was doing it, he'd probably do that too. But he would also, he would be on the side of the protesters, helping them out. Maybe dipping his paw in a little bit, Red Spiral Ray, has there been any update on the Green Lantern TV series HBO was talking about? Would you watch it? Idris Elba as the star playing Jon Stewart would be my idea. Yeah, I think he's maybe too big of a star for it, but yeah, I would totally watch it. Absolutely. 255 AD says, are your parents taking the virus seriously? I have not spoken to my mother in a very long time, so I don't know. I know my dad is. My dad's girlfriend works at a local hospital and has been making sure that he has protective equipment and stuff like that. And as the last I talked to my dad, he was doing well, and he was taking it seriously and practicing good social distancing and stuff like that. Obviously, I haven't seen him for a long time. But as far as I know, my dad is taking it seriously. I have no idea whether my mom is or not. Yeah, Leto is French and she doesn't care about D-Day. Well, she ought to care about D-Day. They liberated your goddamn country, fucking French people. They went out and liberated your goddamn country. God damn it. Yeah, well, I think Winston Duke could be a good Jon Stewart. Sure. I don't know if he'd necessarily be my first choice, but I think Winston Duke is great. You pitched Winston Duke for Cisco too, didn't you? For the rebooted DS9 people were talking about last time. Oh, this is a good one from Maylee. Would Dark Knight Rises Batman side with cops or protesters? Oh, man. I don't know. I'd like to think he would side with protesters, but he was super on the cop side in Dark Knight Rises because they were all together versus Bane. So I don't know. Maybe he would side with the cops. You'd think he would side with the protesters, though, because you're not a cop, Batman. You're Batman. I mean, Batman's kind of a cop, but not officially. Batman shouldn't really. I mean, he shouldn't be a cop because he's not a cop. He's a vigilante. 255 AD, what's wrong with my mom? There's nothing wrong with her. She's healthy as far as I know. She's fine. We just don't have a real close relationship. Okay, there's we're past 9. I said I was gonna wrap it up at 9, so I'll answer one more question and then we'll start wrapping up. So the last question is going to be from Eric Allen, who says, "How do you feel about Cavill coming back as Supes?" I think he did fine. I just hope he gets better. He gets better writing, and we don't get another edgelord Superman. Yeah, I mean, in the right hands, I think Cavill could be a good Superman. I don't think he's had a chance to be a good Superman, but yeah, I mean, I'm not super excited, to be honest, because like, as long as they recast Batman, why don't they just go ahead and recast Superman and start fresh if they want to keep making Superman movies? But I mean, given the right material and the right take on the character, I suppose he could be a good Superman for sure. Yeah. Okay. Last question. I know. Oh, hey, Dana, I didn't see you there. Have you been there the whole time? Batman understands that sometimes you need to work outside the law. Yeah, so Batman wouldn't be like... Batman's not a cop, right? He kind of acts like one sometimes, and he does have fascist tendencies, for sure, as some random geek pointed out. But yeah, Batman... the way I would write Batman, he would not side with the cops if the cops were doing something wrong. You know, if the cops were being abusive or overstepping their authority or using... unjustified means, to enforce the law or hurting people, I don't think Batman would take their side. I think Batman would side with the protesters for sure. Sorry you missed most of it, Dana, but it's good to see you anyway. It's good that you made it for the last couple of minutes. I'm just getting ready to wrap up, but it's always good to see your name in the chat. Sean Hartley said, "What are your thoughts about people who get offended if you say you don't want children?" I think they should mind their own fucking business. It's not nobody else's business if I say I don't want children. By the way, I don't. And I don't have them, and I'm completely fine with that. I'm completely comfortable in that decision. I think people who take, I mean, why would you take it personally? If someone else says they don't want children, why would you take it personally? It has nothing to do with you. So Well, Dana, if you were yelling at people on Facebook, then I think you were. I am knowing you as I do. I'm sure you were doing the Lord's work, so to speak. So that's. I can't begrudge you that. You were probably doing a lot more good there than you would be doing here in this chat. So anyway, I'm going to turn away from the chat now. Thank you, everybody, for being with me tonight in the live chat. Thank you for indulging my little story at the beginning. Thank you for sticking around while I answered everybody's questions. I want to remind you, first of all, Some Random Geek has provided us with a Google Doc that has a bunch of charity links for people who need a little helping hand. The doc is linked in the description of this video, so please check out those charity links and help out our friends if you possibly can in these trying times. Also want to remind you, if you want to help me out, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives and become a patron of this channel for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month or more gets you a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5 and also at the end of a Trek Actually video. But pledges of any amount are super appreciated and allow me to continue doing what I do. So thank you all for being patrons, however long you have been and at whatever level. And also don't forget that I also co-host a couple of podcasts on the Let Me Listen podcast family of podcasts. LetMeListenPodcasts.com is where you can find those. I'm the co-host of the Late Seating podcast and also of the Ensign's Log, both with the great Jason Harding. And our most recent episode of Late Seating was our review of Buckaroo Banzai, which went up last week, and you can listen to right now. And our most recent episode of the Ensign's Log just dropped today, and you can listen to that right now, too. So go to LetMeListenPodcast.com to listen to that, or also you can listen on SoundCloud or subscribe via RSS and listen through your favorite podcast app. Check out Late Seating and check out the Ensign's Log. I love my podcasts, and I think you will too if you've never checked them out. If you do, I hope you like them. Well, that's it, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you being with me. I'll see you for another one of these in 2 weeks, and I'll see you next week for another Star Trek video. Next Wednesday is the special bonus Trek Actually video I'm doing about the best and worst parents in Star Trek. I'm almost done writing it. I'll probably shoot it maybe this weekend and have it ready for Wednesday at some point. So thank you all. Hope you enjoy that. I'm looking forward to making that one. It's been a lot of fun to write so far. Thank you all for joining me in the chat. It was lovely to see you all, such as it is. And take care. Please be safe. Please watch out for yourselves and look out for each other. And take care of each other. And I'll see you. Bye, everybody.